the parables of Jesus. So I want to cover a couple of areas. First, you just have a look at what is a parable. We'll have a look at why did Jesus use parables, and in fact, in answering this question, there's a twist to why he used parables as a teaching tool. We're going to have a look at just a couple of examples of some of his parables, and then we'll wrap up. And in wrapping up, we'll find a further twist to this topic. So let's start. What is a parable? So the word parable, it comes from a Greek word, and it has the idea of a comparison. Here's just one definition of what a parable is. It's a fictional, that is, it's a made-up story, so it's not a real story, it's a made-up story, where certain features in the story are parallel to an important spiritual truth that the story is trying to teach. And that's where you get this idea of a comparison. So there's elements in the story, even though it's a made-up story, there's elements of that story that are parallel to a truth that the story is seeking to teach. So you can see a little bit of a contradiction there. It's a made-up story, it's a fictional story, but the lesson that comes from the story is actually true. So, just some observations about the parables that Jesus gave. While the stories were fictional, that is, that they're made up, they're often based on situations and events or objects that the audience that Jesus was speaking to at the time would have been familiar with, and we'll look at some examples of that tonight. They're different to fables. So you might think of fables. There's Aesop's fables, the tortoise and the hare, the lion and the mouse, the boy who cried wolf. They're sort of well-known fables. What you find with fables is, yes, they teach lessons, but all of the lessons that come from a fable are just based on natural things. So, for example, the tortoise and the hare, the lesson, slow and steady wins the race. The lion and the mouse, kindness is never wasted. The boy who cried wolf, the moral of that story was, liars don't get rewarded even when they tell the truth. So you can see there's morals behind all of those stories, but they're all based on day-to-day things, events. They're based on, if you like, earthly things. They don't focus on spiritual things or heavenly things. So that's where a parable differs from a fable. A parable differs from what are known as mythical stories. So, for example, the story of Pandora's box. So you might have heard of the expression Pandora's box. It's based on Greek mythology. It was to do with the gods, Zeus, Prometheus, and Pandora. And so there's a myth that's built around this story. For Australia, there's how the kangaroo got its pouch. There's a myth around that. It's a mythical story. With any mythical stories, the idea is that the story, as well as the lesson that comes from the story, are both true. Whereas when you come to a parable, as we'll see tonight, the story isn't true. The story is made up. What is true is the lesson that the story is trying to teach. So that's how the parables differ from either fables or what are known today as mythical stories. There's at least 80 parables recorded in the Bible, in the gospel records that Jesus gave. Some are very short, as we'll see tonight. Some are a bit longer. But clearly they were a widely used teaching tool that Jesus used to teach spiritual lessons. And sometimes, and as we'll see tonight, some of the lessons that those parables teach, they're not always on the surface. Sometimes they're hidden. Sometimes there's layers of lessons. And we'll explore a little bit of that tonight. So, our first question, why did Jesus use parables? And this is where we come across our first twist. So this is based on Matthew 13. Because the disciples of Jesus asked the same question. They said to Jesus, why do you speak to the people in parables? So that's our question tonight. And here's the twist. Here's Jesus' response. He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. So straight away in answering the question, why do you talk about, why do you use parables in speaking to the people? he starts talking about the kingdom of heaven, and he talks about something that is hidden about the kingdom of heaven that's been given to the disciples, but it hasn't been given to all people. And you might think, well, that's a bit of a strange response. Like, already you're sort of making this a little bit difficult. Surely it would have been very easy to give a very simple response. Why do you use parables? And just give us a very clear answer. But already in his response to his disciples, you can see that there's elements of something that is, something that we're going to have to tease out. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And again, we look at this and think, wow, this is a pretty strange response. You seem to be saying that, the disciples have been given certain things that are secret, simply mystery about the kingdom of heaven, but it's not given to everyone. And, whoever's received this message, they'll have more, but others, not only won't they have more, what they have will be taken away from them. And straight away we're sort of scratching our heads saying, what's this all about? Why not just give such a simple answer, Jesus? What are you getting at? This is why I speak to them in parables, says Jesus. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In other words, it's like saying their ears are painted on. Their ears, yes, they physically can hear, but they can't hear. Yes, they've got eyes, but their eyes are, as it were, they're glued on. There's just no seeing. And again, we look at this and think this is a really strange answer that Jesus is giving as to why he speaks in parables. In them, that is, in the people who hear these parables, who can physically see but can't see, who can physically hear but can't hear, this is a prophecy that was made long ago by a prophet in the Old Testament of the Bible who said these words, "You'll be ever hearing but never understanding. You'll be ever seeing but never perceiving." In other words, you'll hear the words, you'll hear the message, but it just goes no further. Why? Because you don't want to know, you don't want to learn, you don't want to see. Yes, you can hear physically, you can see physically, and the message comes in and you just put up the shutter saying, nah, I don't want to listen to this. And that's what happened in the time of Isaiah, and Jesus is saying in his own time, that's exactly the situation he would come across. He would talk, and people would hear, they would see, and yet the shutters would come down and it would just go nowhere. It would have no impact at all. Why? What's the problem? This people's heart has become calloused. That is, it's hard. It just cannot be penetrated. There's no response. They hardly hear with their ears. They've closed their eyes. They're not interested in hearing what I've got to say. They're not interested in seeing what I am doing. The miracles that Jesus performed, it just sort of, oh, wow, miracle. It just had no impact at all. Otherwise, if it did register, they might see with their eyes, they might hear with their ears, they might understand with their hearts and turn, and I would heal them. Now, they didn't have anything physically wrong with them. Their hearing was fine. They could see perfectly well in terms of their physical eyesight. But the problem was that the people of his day generally couldn't see their real condition. They couldn't see that they were spiritually sick. In Mark's account, which is the parallel to Matthew, Mark puts it this way, I will forgive their sins and heal them. You see, it's a spiritual thing. It's not physical, it's spiritual, it's their sins, and they see no problem. Oh, what's the problem with sin? We've got no problem with sin, we're okay. The problems are all out there with all these other people, not with us. And that was the problem. They had shut their eyes and their ears to seeing their need for forgiveness and for God to help them and for them to be healed. And therefore, Jesus is saying that's the situation. But, he says to his disciples, blessed are your eyes because they see, your ears because they hear. In other words, for those who want to understand what these parables are about, you'll latch onto them, you'll think about it, and you'll work it through. For others, it's going to just be lights on and then lights off, and it means nothing and it has no impact at all. So if you really want to know, then you'll be able to learn. If you're not interested, then in fact what the parables will do is they will just set you in your ways of saying, well, I'm not interested and this is all too hard and I'm just going to walk away. So let's just briefly summarise. Why did Jesus use parables? Well, as we've just said, they provided understanding to those who wanted to know, but they just caused further confusion for those who weren't interested in knowing. The parables were deliberately designed by Jesus to divide listeners into two groups based on their responses. It was a deliberate way of trying to get to the people. For those who would want to hear, they would learn, they would understand. For others, it just caused further confusion, and the blindness and the deafness, if you like, would be cemented. By using stories, it roused interest and it helped the hearer to remember and to recall. So that's why he used stories. I don't know if you've ever been to conferences or to speeches. What sometimes is good at a conference is when someone starts off with a story or with an anecdote. It's one thing to hear someone just sort of rattling through all of these facts and details, but when there's stories that support what the person's saying, it sort of brings it to life, and that's what Jesus was doing here. He was using these stories to get people interested. It wasn't just him giving a whole list of rules and things to do and don't do, and so therefore it would help people remember. They'd remember the story, they would recall it. But if you were in the category of people who weren't interested, then they'd say, oh, it's just another silly story and it's all too hard and this is just stupid, and they just close their ears and close their eyes. So again, it's just this idea of dividing the listeners, those who wanted to hear and learn, those who weren't interested at all. Parables sought to stimulate people to think and to awaken their spiritual perception. And we're going to see this in the parables. As we've said, parables were trying to get people to think just beyond the natural, the day-to-day things, and actually see something that was spiritual, that was important. And that's what the parables were doing. It was trying to elevate their thinking just beyond the here and now to see something further in terms of the message Jesus was giving. And the most important element of a parable, it's not the story. As I said, the story's made up. It's the lesson, the spiritual lesson that the story is trying to teach. So let's have a look at some examples of a parable of Jesus. So here's the first one, Matthew 13. That same day Jesus went out of the house, he sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat, he sat in it, and while all the people stood on the shore. So here's this big group of people, they come to listen to Jesus. So what Jesus could have done is he just got to go through a whole list of things, the do's and don'ts, and here's what you've got to do, and here's what God likes and what God doesn't like. He could have done that, but he doesn't. This is the approach he takes. He told them many things in parables, in stories, saying, so here's the first one, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell among the path and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it didn't have much soil, so the seed sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, they withered because there was no root. So he's going through this story and he's sort of explaining to the crowds, and they're all listening to this story of this sower who's out and this seed going out, and all these different things are happening as the sower goes about his work. Other seed fell among thorns which grew up and they choked the plants, and then still other seed fell on good soil where it produced the crop 100, 60 or 30 times what was sown. So here's the story Jesus has given, and then he finishes with this. Whoever has ears, let him hear. In other words, don't let your ears just be painted on. This is something, it's not just a story. We've got to think about what this story is trying to teach. And that's the challenge of this particular parable. So, what does the parable mean? What spiritual truth does the story teach? In this case, Jesus explains it to us himself. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. So here he is explaining to his disciples what this parable actually meant. I've highlighted just some of the words that spring out of explaining this parable to his disciples. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom, so just remember that this is a message about a kingdom, and does not understand it, the evil one comes, snatches away that which was sown in his heart. Well, that's the seed sown along the path. So he's explaining now what was happening in that story. So the first lot of seed got scattered on a path and the birds came and took it. Well, here's what Jesus is drawing from that story in terms of spiritual truth. And it's to do with the message about the kingdom. So the first lot of where this seed falls, they're not interested. They don't understand it. Eyes are closed, ears are shut up. And so the seed is lost. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. So here, notice the emphasis, it's on the word. That is the word of God. It's the word about this kingdom. It's not talking about the here and now. It's talking about something that's future. This kingdom, it's talking about the word of God. So it's not about everyday events and natural things. That's not what the lesson that this parable is about. It's about something spiritual. But since they have no root, they last only for a short time, and then when trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. So here's the scenario. And again, notice it's the word. So that's this seed that's getting spread by this sower. The seed represents the word of God, and that word, as we've seen, was about the kingdom. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word. So again, it's the word of God. But the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. So this is the response to the seed. Now, the key is, all the way through, it's the same seed. You notice it's always the word, it's the word, it's the word. It's the same word, and it's hitting all these different types of soils. So there's nothing wrong with the word, and there's nothing inconsistent with the word. The problem isn't, I put this type of seed over here, but a different type of seed there, and that's why that one didn't work and this one did. It's all the same seed. It gets spread everywhere. Where the problem is the actual soil that receives it. And all these different circumstances in terms of a response to those who might hear the word of God. And so far, it's all been to nothing. It's been unfruitful. The seed has produced nothing really. So we go on, but the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. So in effect, what's happening here is that the seed is actually testing the soil. As I said, there's nothing, it's all the same seed, and it's testing all these different types of soil. And so as we can see, the seed, the comparison of the seed, well, it's talking about the word of God. That's what the seed represents in this story. And the soil, well, it's all these different people and their situations who receive the seed, the word of God, about the kingdom, and the soil is testing them for their response. How are you going to respond to this promise of a kingdom to come? Are you interested? Does it make any impact on you? What do you want? What do you think? And so what we're seeing in this parable is these different, if you like, types of people in terms of how they respond to this same seed, the same word of God that is being openly spread everywhere. And it's only the good soil that actually brings forth fruit. So that's one parable, and that's Jesus' explanation to it. Now, you can imagine people hearing that parable, hearing the story, and then having to think about, well, what is this all about? As I said, if someone's not interested, if they all think it's all a nonsense and it's all too hard, then they're not even going to bother. The eyes are closed, the ears are shut. It's going to go nowhere. It's only for someone who wants to sort of explore what's this all about and ask questions and reason about it, that this parable is going to have an impact. And then they might go away, and then maybe in a couple of months' time they're out walking about and they see the same event. They see a sower actually physically sowing, and they think, hey, I remember that parable that Jesus said that had a sower, and it gets them thinking again about, well, what was that all about? I didn't quite work that out. And that's why Jesus was using parables in such a way. So let's have a look at another one. This one, a really super short one. Jesus also told them this parable. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into a pit? And you say, well, of course that's going to happen. If you're a blind person, you go to a blind person and say, hey, lead me. I want to follow you. Well, of course, if your leader is blind and you're blind, then you're definitely going to come to grief. You're going to fall over, you're going to trip, you will fall into a pit. And that's the parable. So it's a really super short one. So we look at the parable of the sower, it's a bit longer. This one's a two-liner. That's the parable. And we say, well, Jesus, what's the spiritual lesson you're trying to draw from this? Well, the them, when it says Jesus spoke this parable to them, he's actually talking to his disciples. And when you think about it, you think, well, how is it possible that you're going to have a blind person leading a blind person? Like, surely if you went to a blind person and say, hey, lead me, and the blind person say, look, I'm sorry, but I actually can't see myself, so I really aren't going to be helped. The only way a blind person is going to lead another blind person is if the blind person who's leading thinks they can actually see. They think, oh yeah, I can see, yeah, sure, come on, I'll take you along, and into the mud pit. That's the only way that's going to happen. Because otherwise the leader would say, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you, I'm blind. But if the person who's leading says, yeah, sure, I can see, I'm good, that's the only way this is going to happen. And Jesus is actually giving this parable not to the people out there, the ones who we saw in Matthew 13 who had their eyes closed even though they could physically see, and had their ears closed even though they could hear. He's not talking to them. He's actually saying this to his disciples. You think, wow, well, okay, what's the point? Well, you see, it's possible to be a follower of Jesus, to be his disciple, and think you can see spiritually and yet be spiritually blind. This isn't just a them and us thing. Well, that's them out there who aren't interested, but us, well, we're different. We're disciples of Jesus. He's saying, no, this can have an effect on a follower of Jesus as well. Thinking they can see spiritually and yet can be spiritually blind. I guess another lesson that this teaches in terms of a spiritual truth is, apart from Jesus, be very careful who we follow as our guide in life. Because sometimes, as we saw in this parable, the leader could well be blind and might say, yeah, I can see, and actually turn out to be blind. So be careful in terms of who we follow. Yes, we can follow Jesus as a disciple of Jesus, but if we decide to follow other people, just be careful in terms of who we pick as our guide, because it might well be that when it comes to spiritual things, they're blind and we're going to fall with them. And a particular danger is to confuse spiritual blindness and spiritual sight. In other words, we think we can see clearly spiritually, but in fact we're blind. And the only way we're going to be able to determine that is if we constantly look at ourselves in terms of what the Word of God says, because that's our guide, and say, well, actually, am I living my life as a blind person, blind to what God wants me to do and blind to the future that God offers me? Or am I actually living my life as someone who actually can see from a spiritual perspective? Let's have a look at another one. This is Matthew 7. And it's amazing how many of Jesus' parables focus on the looking and the hearing. Because remember, that was the big problem of his day. People could, yes, they could look, they could see, but eyes were shut. They could hear, ears were painted on. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank that's in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye and then you will see clearly. So get this idea of clear seeing. You know, you're not blind, to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Now, if you wanted to rubbish Jesus' parables, then this is a classic one. You'd say, this is stupid. Like, yeah, sure, you're going to walk around with a big beam out of your eye and then you're going to pick on some little person over here who's got, I got some sawdust in your eye. Oh, you know, you would just rubbish this if you wanted to. If you wanted to just treat his parables with contempt, which for most of the people, that was the problem. Ears closed, eyes shut. This is perfect ammunition to do that. But I tell you what, if you wanted to get people's attention, you know, and imagine Jesus perhaps giving this parable with a little smile on his face. And this is one that would really call attention. So you get a little speck of sawdust, and you know what it's like. It's a real pain, like, you know, it just pests you. But you can still see. But if you're walking around with a great plank out of your eye, like, that's going to be a problem. And so here you are with this plank and you're just focusing on other people who've got specks of sawdust, saying, oh, you got to fix that. You got a problem because you can't see. And you're bashing your head against all sorts of things. So what's the spiritual lesson that comes from this, again, made-up story? It's possible to be so focused on finding and judging shortcomings in others that we can overlook addressing the major faults in ourselves. And you see, that was the problem for so many of the people Jesus was talking about. They didn't have a problem. We can see, we can hear, we know about God, we're fine. Nothing sick about us. They walked around, that's how they approached life. No problem, we don't need this sort of stuff. Oh, but we can pick on everyone else's faults. We'll get, oh, look at what you're doing. Your life, you've got to clean yourself up. And it was all focusing on the wrong things instead of looking at themselves and saying, hey, we've got a problem and we've got to fix this problem. And we'll do that first before we start then trying to sort of go out and get other people and find their faults and fix them. That's a problem. So you can see the spiritual lesson that comes from these parables. Luke 16, another parable. This is a longer one. Jesus told his disciples there was a certain rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called his manager in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because you cannot be manager any longer. So here we have an estate manager. He's looking after an estate. And basically this person has the responsibility of the whole estate. He's in a very responsible position. And the rich man who owns the estate has got word that this manager has been up to no good. He's been wasting the possessions of the rich man in running the estate. So he says, right, we're going to have a meeting. You're going to give your account of what's going on because based on what I've heard, says the rich man, I don't want you to be my manager any longer. So the manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig and I'm ashamed to beg. So he realises that he's in strife. He knows that he's been caught out. Clearly whatever he's been doing is correct, like he's been doing the wrong thing. And so now he's worrying about his future. What am I going to do? I've got to do something, but what am I going to do? Well, I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So in other words, what he's doing, he's working out his immediate future. He's planning for his future. Okay, so he's got to work things out and thinking, well, I can't dig and I can't beg. I need to do something to look after myself in the immediate future. And so that when I get kicked out of this job, then I'll have somewhere to go. So this person's a rogue. You know, there's no hint that he's going to put up his hand and say, yeah, I did the wrong thing, I'm sorry, and I'll make up for it. And none of that. He's just going to work his way out of this. So he's a rogue. So what does he do? He calls in each one of his master's debtors And he asked the first one, "How much do you owe my master?" Now notice, this person doesn't owe this manager anything. It's how much does he owe the estate. So this manager is playing around with things that don't belong to him. This is the estate's money. So he goes to the first person and says, "How much do you owe?" Well, the first person says, 900 gallons of olive oil. You know, that's 3,500 litres of olive oil. That's an enormous amount of oil. Oh, 3,500 litres of oil. Oh, okay, says the manager. Take your bill. Yeah, make it 450. Cut it in half, 50% discount. How good is that? Wow, that's pretty good. You see, this manager's playing around with things that don't belong to him. He's got no right to be doing this. He hasn't sort of dialed in. He hasn't dialed in the rich man saying, "Hey, by the way, I'm offering 50%, discounts to all you people who owe you money." He's just doing this because he's worried about his immediate future. He's got to work it out. How am I going to look after myself in the short term? So the next person, "How much do you owe?" he calls him in. "Well, I owe 1,000 bushels of wheat." 1,000 bushels of wheat, that's about 30 tonne of wheat. You would need probably around about 40 hectares of land to produce this amount of wheat. That's a massive amount. So bearing in mind, we're talking here of Israel, which isn't sort of known for the sort of farms that we have in Australia. Like 40 hectares, yeah, well, here it is. You owe 40 hectares worth of wheat. Okay, so take your bill and let's just make it 800. So he's offering these discounts to the people who owe money to the estate. Well, when this rich man finds out about it, he commends the dishonest manager, not because he's done the right thing, not because he's owned up, not because he's acted ethically. He commends the manager because he'd acted shrewdly. In other words, he's made provision for the future. His plan is, I'll get kicked out of this job and all these people who have got these massive discounts, they're going to look after me because, well, I've looked after them. I've scratched their back, hopefully they'll scratch mine. And then the minister of the estate adds this, "The people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light." So here's Jesus sort of injecting this into the story, and he's making a comparison. He's saying that the way the people of this world operate is often much more shrewd in dealing with their own than the people of the light. So straight away you're getting these two groups. You got the people of this world and how they operate. That is, people have got no idea about how God operates, got no idea about the parables and what they mean. And then the people of the light, that is, people who have been enlightened by, as we saw in the parable of the sower, the word of God. So when it comes to the people of the world, they're very shrewd in making provision for their future because, well, that's how they deal. They deal shrewdly. And they're much more adept at doing that than the people of the light. And we're going to find out why that is very soon. So what does this parable mean? What's the spiritual lesson? Well, Jesus himself, again, like the parable of the sower, explains what the spiritual point of this parable was. Jesus says, "I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings." So just like that unjust manager, that fraud, used his worldly wealth to gain friends, Jesus is saying, for those who are in the light, do the same thing. We go, "Oh, good, so we all should operate like that manager. Yeah, we'll rip everyone off and you give discounts everywhere and we'll be looked after." No, we're going to find out that's not what Jesus is saying. But he's saying we've got to have the same approach. Use what we have to gain friends that will welcome us into something that is eternal, not just temporal. You see, the way that manager operated, it was all just temporal. It was just the here and now, the immediate future. Jesus is saying, no, if you're a child of light, you look at things from the perspective of eternity. This is long-term. And using what you have now in order to be welcomed into something that is eternal. So straight away we can see Jesus is now starting to take things from the here and now, and he's just starting to take it to a higher level. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So we think of that unjust manager. Yeah, he couldn't be trusted. He could be trusted with a little or much. He just couldn't be trusted. But Jesus is saying, well, if you can be trusted with a little, you can be trusted with much. And you say, well, Jesus, what's your point? What are you getting at? Okay, so this manager was dishonest, but now you're talking about people being trusted. What's your point? If you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? So what he's now saying is saying, well, okay, how do we respond to worldly wealth? For the children of light, do we see it as being the be-all and end-all, and we'll do everything to secure our future, if that includes ripping people off, offering discounts, acting fraudulently, acting unethically? Is that what we do? Is that how we approach life? Or will we use what we have and what we are given, the worldly wealth, in order to win true riches? And those true riches, as we've seen, are something to do with eternity, eternal dwellings. If you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? If you can't be trusted, then why should you be trusted with something that is eternal? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And that's the lesson that this parable is teaching. He's saying, look, what does money mean to us? We treat life like this manager, this unethical manager? Is that what we do in terms of the future? And our focus is just on the here and now, and looking after our future just in the short term, even if that means doing the wrong thing? Or do we use what we have in terms of the material wealth that we have, of not using that for our future in the sense of looking after our short-term needs, but using it in such a way that it will bring us something that is eternal? And it's a very different mindset in terms of how we respond. So you can see some of these parables were quite challenging. And you can imagine people thinking about this, thinking, what's this about? What's he getting at? And there's these layers of lessons there that he's trying to elevate the minds of everyone who heard in order that they might respond. And here's the response. Here's the immediate response to this parable. And guess what it is? The Pharisees who love money heard this and they were sneering at him. Oh, you see, they didn't want to hear this. This is sort of getting a bit close to home, but of course the shutters go up, the ears get closed, the eyes get shut. We don't want to... And of course, the best way then to respond is just to have a go at them and, ridicule. That's always the best way to approach something that's getting a bit close to home. And they sneered at him and they joked and said, oh, this is all rubbish. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. Now, isn't that interesting? You see, that's why there's this difference between the children of light and the children of our world. Because what the children of our world see as valuable is not the way God sees it. And so what this parable is doing is saying, hey, we've got to get this shift in terms of seeing beyond the now and the here and now and what our world sees as being valuable and securing our future, even if that means doing the wrong thing and cutting corners and acting unethically. No, we don't go down that track, because that's detestable to God, and he's the one who offers us the eternal things. And that's where our future is focused. Luke 18, this is an interesting parable because it's one of the few parables where Jesus actually starts the parable by telling us what this parable is about. Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. So we know what this parable is about. praying and not giving up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. So you've got a judge and he cares about nothing but himself. He's not interested in God. God means nothing to him. He doesn't care about people who he's judging. He's just focused on himself. So this is this judge. There was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, grant me justice against my adversary. So she's just asking for justice. She's not asking for retribution to whatever this person's done. She doesn't want a public flogging. She doesn't want someone to be sort of hung up there for everyone to throw fruit at. She's just saying, I just want justice. And that's the plea she makes to this judge. Well, for some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I'll see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me. So what's happening is that this woman's constantly coming to this judge saying, give me justice, please. That's all I ask for. And she just come time and time and time again. And in the end he says, I'm sick of this. She's just driving me nuts and she's going to come and just kill me. Like I'll give her what she wants just to get rid of her. Okay, so that's the reason he responds. Not because he thinks highly of her, not because he cares that, well, God says this is the right thing to do. Nah, he just does it for selfish reasons, to get rid of her. The Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? So does God operate the same way as this judge? For those who are, and you notice the description, those who are his chosen ones, those who are, in that previous parable, the children of light, those in the parable of the sower, those who receive the word and respond to it, how does God treat them? Is he going to be like that judge and just don't care until they drive him nuts and then, well, I'll just do what you say because I don't care, but will he just keep putting them off? I tell you, he will give them justice speedily. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? So Jesus finishes this parable with a question. When I come, will I find faith on the earth? Faith in what? What's Jesus on about? What are you talking about? When you come, will you find faith on the earth? What faith? Faith in what? And this is the spiritual truth that comes from this particular parable. Remember how the parable started? Always pray and not give up. In other words, that's the answer to the question. Faith in what? Faith to pray and not give up. Persevering in prayer. That's what he's saying. Keep praying. Don't give up. But you might say, hang on, there's a problem here with this parable. There seems to be a contradiction. Because why do we need to pray and not give up if God is going to act speedily for his chosen ones? So surely that means that we pray and then whatever, in terms of what we're asking for, God will speedily respond. So then why do we have to pray and not give up? What's the problem? Doesn't make sense. So you can see some of these parables were quite difficult. And that's the whole idea. Jesus is getting people to think and to say, hang on, what's this? How does this match? You notice the contrasts. Pray and not give up. Cry out to God night and day, verse, justice speedily. And on the surface, it seems there's contradictions here. If we're going to have to cry out to God day and night, then how can justice come speedily? How does it work? What it simply means is that when it comes time for God to act, he will act speedily. But that might not be straight away. And the key is, don't give up. Just because our prayers don't get answered straight away or don't get answered in the way we think they should get answered, doesn't mean that God isn't going to act. When the time is right, then he will act. And sometimes the way he responds won't be the way we think he should respond, but in fact the answer is better. But the key is we've just got to keep going. We've got to pray and not give up. We've got to cry out to God day and night. Don't give up. Believing that, unlike that unjust judge, he does care and he won't put us off forever. And when the time comes, he will act in what is our best interest. So that's the spiritual lesson that comes from this particular parable. So let's just wrap up and we'll have a look at our further twist. So what we've seen tonight, we've looked at what a parable is, hopefully. We looked at why Jesus used parables, and that was the first twist that we introduced tonight. Jesus' parables were deliberately designed to divide listeners into two groups based on their responses. He deliberately did that, and we saw the reasons for that. And we also looked at some examples of Jesus' parables and the spiritual truths they can teach. So you might say, well, what's the further twist? What's the final twist? The final twist is this. Many of the stories in the parables of Jesus, we know that they're made up, they're fictional. But they're also quite unrealistic and they're even absurd. You might say, what do you mean? Well, let's just take the examples of the one we looked. The sower. Do you honestly think there would be a sower who'd just get bagfuls of seed and just go, just go walking everywhere, just throwing seed everywhere, onto paths, onto rocks, no. Particularly in Jesus' day when people were generally very poor. You are not going to find a sower just going, that's not going to happen. The blind leader of the blind? Surely, come on, that's a good story, but there's no way you're going to go to a blind person and say, yeah, come on, let's go. Can you lead me? Oh, yeah. That's not going to happen. It's absurd. The sawdust speck and the plank in the eye. Yeah, right, you can see someone walking around with a big plank. Oh, come on, Jesus, this is ridiculous. These stories, yes, they're fictional, but they're bordering on the comical. The unethical estate manager. Do you honestly believe someone would owe for 3,500 litres of oil? That's a year's worth of oil. And you say, yeah, it'll all go on credit. You'd be demanding at least 50% of the payment up front. There is no way an estate would go into debt for those sorts of amounts. 30 tonne of wheat, that's a year's production of wheat. There is no way an estate would do that. So these parables, they're just unrealistic. The unjust judge, sure, you think an unjust judge is going to have this woman come and drive him mad and just get one of the guards and say, look, just take her out the back somewhere. What? You see, there's elements to all of these parables that are just unrealistic. We might say, why? Why is Jesus doing that, building these elements into these parables? What does it signify? Well, what it does is it makes the story stand out. It really makes you help and remember and recall, because there's absurdities about these parables that they're not just mundane stories. There's elements that are, whoa, this is pretty strange. What's going on here? It provides greater opportunity. If you want to discredit the parables, then this is the best way to do it. So if you've got people who are blind and can't hear because, well, they can physically, but they don't want to, this is the best way to do it. They can just look at these parables and they are these stupid, they're just idiot stories, and just walk away. So you're giving them perfect ammunition to do that. It does provoke pondering and questioning. What's going on here? This is, why the extremes? But the key thing, I think, is what it does, it introduces into the parables the concept that God is always at work in the parables. In other words, God's grace. Now you think, let's just take one example. The parable of the sower. What happens? So we know the seed represents the word of God and the seed is perfectly good. And what does the sower do? Does he get selective and say, right, what soil will I give it to? That looks good soil. I'll just give my seed to that soil there, and that's all, because I know that's going to give me the best return. What does the sower do? He goes everywhere and spreads the seed. Everyone has an opportunity to respond. He doesn't get selective. He doesn't say, yep, I'll just focus on that group or that nation. He does it right across. That's how God's grace works. And that's what we see in these parables. That's why there's layers of lessons that take us to another level. And that's why I would suggest that some of the parables introduce this element of, wow, what's this all about, in order to bring out these higher spiritual lessons. So thanks for your time, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you.